online sphere for visibility and access, while we help others enhance their skill set and knowledge via education. Our focus is clear: build businesses online and help persons redefine themselves through knowledge enhancement. Our website is popular with persons who have limited time but are constantly trying to learn something new or get hands-on knowledge. Our micro-learning workshops have helped many to solve problems in their industries. Whether you are based locally, regionally, or internationally, Caribbean Connect is accessible to you as we continue to break down borders of access. In this fireside chat, I am pleased to introduce Aka Ali, who's going to bring some great conversation here tonight on leadership. And actually, I got to know Aka when I read her book. I thought to myself, she was speaking to me through the book. So I am very excited to have her here on the platform as we bring great conversation on leadership. But before, we bring her to the floor, we need to introduce her a little bit, right? Who is Aka Ali Kerr? Aka is the HR director at Hyatt Regency, Trinidad. She has a passion and desire to serve others. She has a BSc in psychology with a minor in legal studies from Nova Southeastern University in Miami and postgrad diploma in HRM from IOB. Aka has 20 years. Okay, that's 20 years of experience, but when you're looking at it, you want to determine, look, right? In developing and implementing business practice strategies in compensation, recruitment, and selection, training and development, job analysis, workman's compensation, employee relations, employee benefits, performance management, and industrial relations. As a first-time author of the book, The Master Guide to Leadership Through the Lens of Care, and a John Maxwell certified coach, already she got me, trainer and speaker, Aka has facilitated workshops, seminars, lectures, and keynote addresses, which aids in personal and professional growth through study and practical application of leadership materials. Working together with potential and experienced leaders, she has successfully influenced the engagement, productivity, and profitability of individuals and their teams. Aka, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I am so honored to have the opportunity to chat with this audience. Thank you very much for that introduction, Giovanni. Thank you. This is going to be epic. Yeah.
Great, of course, great. And as we said, when I read your book, I thought you were speaking to me. I had so much. I was like, oh, this is why, this is it. Okay, right. I need to chat more with Aka. So yes, I have your book right here, The Master Guide to Leadership Through the Lens of Care. It is really, really, really a good read. It is really, really a good read. And I've learned so much. So Aka, tell us a little bit about yourself, and probably, we read your profile. Most of us know you a little bit from this, but why did you want to write this book? Tell us something about yourself.
Many people ask me, Aka, where do you get this passion and this love for people? And it dawned on me, I got it from my mom. See, my mom was a teacher, and every day I went to school with mom, it was like an event. The way that the children met mom, greeted mom, the parents. And there was one particular day, mom reached to the back seat of her car. She handed the security guard a paper bag, and they exchanged pleasantries, and we drove off. I asked mom, what did you give that security guard? She said, Aka, I gave him a meal. I said, why did you give him a meal? She shared that a few months ago, the security guard said he was having some financial difficulty. And on that day, my mother decided that every day she came to school, she would bring a meal for the security guard. And there are two things that mommy told me that has resonated with me. She says, Aka, care is a verb. It's a doing and a telling word. And care is only care when the person receiving it feels cared for. And Shivani, that is what I have used as my anchor as a leader. How do you care for people? How do you respect persons so that you can tap into their full potential? And in my 20 years of experience, I've worked in banking, I've worked in telecommunications, and now I'm in hospitality. The consistent thread is how you treat people. And for me, I treat people how I want to be treated, with dignity and respect. And that has really pushed me to write this book. Giovanni, I can't explain for the last 18 months how many people have called and asked, Aka, I need help. I don't know what to do. Where can I start to ignite the workforce? And it led me to write the book, The Master Guide to Leadership Through the Lens of Care, because I want to help persons navigate through this crisis. I want to equip them as to how we could pivot as leaders, and how could we tap into persons' potential so that they could become high performance leaders. So that's really where I started and where I am right now as a leader.
So, you spoke about a couple of my favorite words right there, right? Crisis, but don't tell anybody that I like crisis, right? But I like crisis if I could solve it, right? So crisis, high performing leaders, and you also spoke about care. And as leaders, that's what we have to do. We have to care.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
no more than ever, that's what you have to do.
Absolutely.
People care.
Absolutely.
So we're here to discuss about leadership. And, as we get into the conversation more, I know we'll share with each other, why is it, is there a change? And how could we as leaders now, do we have to pivot? You use the word already, pivot. How are we going to change? What do we have to do? How do we get into crisis, out of crisis, that is?
Yes.
So something you wrote.
Yes.
Very interested, huh? And I mean, we could sit here and talk about this for hours upon hours. We know that. Something you wrote in your book about performance management.
Yes.
Performance management as a leader. Tell us about this performance management and the importance of this as a leader.
Yes, thank you so much. In my book, I said that performance management is a journey. It's not a destination. What does that mean?
I love that, yes.
You see, many times leaders, we meet with our teams once a year. And so we make performance management into an event. But performance is a journey. It's every day, speaking, coaching, mentoring. That's what we do as leaders. I would share with you what I do. Every week, I meet with each member of my team. And the meeting is twofold. I get to make an authentic connection. I get to build trust. And then after I've built that connection, then I talk about work. But we have to get to the place where we understand that every moment we get to interact, to pour, to grow is an opportunity in performance management. It's consistency. And as you talked about the book is rooted in 6 mandates. It's care with action. Care is a verb. It's a doing and a telling word. And then there's consistency with accountability. That consistency is performance management. How consistently are you performing the task that you were hired to do? And are you held accountable when you don't perform. And the last two mandates I speak about is competence with the right attitude. So going back to your question, performance management leaders, if you do not manage something, how do you measure it? And many times we run into the problem that we hire someone and we never give them feedback. And that's what performance management is. It's giving you feedback so that you could be the best version of yourself. But it must be consistent. And that is integral. If you look at many organizations, the person starts and they're excited and their performance level is high. And eventually you wonder, is that the same person I hired? Yes, it is, but you did not manage their performance. You never met with them. You never told them that they're doing well or they're not. You never put them on a training plan. You never coached them. So then that performance principle is eroded because there's no feedback. It's not consistent. You treated it as a destination and not a journey. It's every day.
Oh,
and I spent a lot of time talking about that in the book.
Yes,
It's
yes.
a journey. It's a journey. And as leaders, we have to remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Something you said, with as a journey and not a
Yes.
destination. And as a leader, that's what we want. We want to be able to look at what we do
Yes.
with our team.
Yes.
And it's not a one-off thing that you're
That's
doing.
right. That's right.
But every day. And then at the end of the performance appraisal, you will hear a certain person saying, oh, well, Aka, she's not performing. She's not doing this.
Yes.
But throughout the year, did you tell me? Did you coach me? Do I know what I'm supposed to do?
Exactly. And
then
how
we
many
blame.
times, and how many times this then becomes a legal matter? Because then the employee says they feel targeted. They didn't know that they were underperforming because you never told them. You think about performance management like a plant.
Mhm.
If you don't water the plant, it's going to die.
Yes, yes.
If you don't manage performance, it's going to drop. And that is how we have to look at performance management. It's every day. You water your plant every day.
Mm-hmm.
You manage performance every day.
Aka, you said a very good metaphor that you have to look
Yes.
at your plants and,
Correct.
water them. Of course, we don't compare plants with me, right? Because if you look at the plants in my house, it's not good, right? So don't compare that to performance management, right? With people, for me, but I get you. So performance management, as leaders, you also made a very important point here with accountability.
Absolutely.
We are accountable at the end of the day. And if you're in a leadership role, that's what you have to do, be accountable. That's lacking also, as you've seen.
Absolutely. It's throughout, it's the moral fabric that is somewhat eroded right now. There's no accountability for actions. And I mean, we could talk about that for hours, but it starts at home. Because the persons that live at home go to work. So if they're not held accountable at home, how do you hold them accountable at work? But that again is the moral fabric and how you're socialized. And that also something that employers have found, that they now have to become mother and father, because what should have happened at home doesn't. So you now have to train someone to have a high work ethic and to do something to its end and not just stop and start. So that again starts at home, but it really is what keeps a performance culture very, very active. It's performance management. It's
you jumped into the other question I wanted to ask you about culture and organization culture and the importance of organizations culture in what we're about.
Absolutely. So I work at Hyatt's Regency Trinidad, and many persons ask me, Aka, how many expats do you have? You must have a lot of expats and a lot of, well-educated persons. And I smile. I said, I have 6 expats. 75% of my demographic is the East-West corridor, Belmont, Mova, beat them. That's where our staff come from. So the next question is, how do I don't know if anyone here has ever been at Hyatt. How do you maintain that performance-driven, customer-driven environment? That's your culture. And you do not compromise your culture, because your culture is a competitive advantage. I tell my team all the time, a bed is a bed is a bed. Hilton has beds, Radisson has beds. But what we serve at Hyatt is service. And that's your culture. But it doesn't happen overnight, Shivani. It's continuous. It's how do you hire the person? We hire for attitude, not for aptitude. That's the first place that you start in maintaining your culture. A lot of organizations, they look at resumes and they look at the academic accolades and they feel, okay, if Akka has this letter, then she's good. But what is Akka's attitude? Your attitude determines your altitude. Your attitude takes your team up, or it could take your team down. So it's important, and that your attitude is a manifestation of what your culture is. And it's absolutely critical that as employers, we leaders, we establish the culture. I heard many leaders sometimes, well, it's not us, it's the staff. You are the catalyst for culture. And you create the culture by your manner. I mean, are you a leader that you would like to follow? Ask yourself that. If you had to follow you, would you follow you? Do you create the culture that you speak about? And one integral part of leadership is that we have to walk the talk.
Yes.
If you do not walk the talk, what are you speaking about? Culture. Culture is the walk and the talk. And it's absolutely important. You could create any environment that you are the catalyst for, that you hold persons accountable for, that is consistent. That's what culture is. Culture is consistency. You know, and that's something that we really have to get to the understanding how important you are as a leader. Leadership. We set the tone. And leadership is not a badge of power, it's a badge of honor. How do you wear that badge? You know, what type of aura do you display? That's culture. That environment. Shivani, have you ever walked into an office and you feel a heaviness?
Of course.
You're
yeah,
like,
of course, yeah.
What's going on? What created that heaviness? Is it the leader? Is that the culture? Who created that culture?
Well, the person on top, as we said, drives everything that we do.
Precisely. And we have to get to the understanding that if you do not want to be held accountable, then you cannot lead. Accountability and leadership goes hand in hand. We are accountable for everything that happens in our organizations. We determine the culture, not our staff, we do. And if you find your staff is determining more of the culture than you, then are you the leader?
Yeah, we said,
and we can talk, that's right, correct. And we can talk for hours about formal leaders versus informal leaders. But you as a leader, not only in title, but in action, you should be able to create that culture.
And how do you create that culture then, Akka? How could you create that culture? How could you create that culture?
It starts with simple things, you know. Sometimes we overthink. It's respect. It's when you walk into the office, do you say good morning? Do you say good morning?
Yes, for sure.
And if you are walking and somebody says, Hi, good morning, Aka. How are you? Do you pause?
You listen.
Do you listen? And if you ask Aka, how are you doing today? And the response is not typical of Aka. Do you pause and say, Aka, what's going on? Or do you just, as a formality, just move on?
Yeah.
Those are the little things that we must do as leaders. That is the expectation and more so the requirement as leaders.
To
We
listen.
need, absolutely, it's active listening, not just listening, active listening. Having that discernment, being able to determine what are the peaks and troughs, what's going on, have a conversation, building trust.
Yeah.
Leadership is about trust. And I want to pause for a little, thinking about this present pandemic. And a lot of leaders struggle and have been struggling because they are trying to create a trusting environment in the middle of a crisis. Very, very difficult. You should have established that trusting relationship before the crisis. Because what happens in a crisis is that it reveals your faults, your, what's the word?
Inefficiencies.
It reveals your efficiencies. And what this crisis has done, the efficiencies of different organizations, the lack of trust, the lack of honesty, the lack of follow-up, the lack of follow-through, the lack of every possible thing that propels an organization has been revealed in this crisis. Because what a crisis does is that anything that is not operating as it should becomes glaring. It's almost like putting a light. A crisis puts a light on your inefficiencies. And unfortunately, in this crisis, that is what has happened. We have come to a place where we need to take a moment and understand that as leaders, dignity and respect, follow up and follow through, honesty. Those are some key tenets, emotional intelligence. And we'll talk a little bit about that because I talk a lot about that in my book. How do we as leaders display a high EI, emotional intelligence, especially in a crisis? This crisis has really crippled us. This pandemic has really brought us on our back foot. But what do we do as a result of this crisis? And these are things that we have to kind of talk about, and is discussed in my book as well.
Because a point here that it just triggered in my mind, that a lot of organizations now, they may have been very large organizations, very good, making a lot of money, revenue, good income generation, etc. And now the crisis has hit them, and it's failing. It's failing.
Absolutely.
It's failing. And it's a point that you made. It's failing because you will be probably hiding behind, some things are just going well behind a brand, and now look at it. You can't pivot.
That's right. Correct. That's right. That's right.
This is where true leadership will come in.
Correct. Because a lot of businesses and employers were successful in spite of themselves. So it was not because of processes or procedures. The market facilitated high revenue because people had more spending power. So people bought your items. But now in this crisis, where your actual spending power and your income has been reduced, people are now selective as to where they spend their money. And they will only spend money when there's a value. So what this crisis has really revealed is that it's important for all organizations to have a value proposition. Must have a value proposition. What is your differentiator? Is it service? Is it your product? What is it? And then that needs to be your differentiator. And this pandemic has revealed that many organizations did not have a competitive differentiator. They were successful, but they can't say why. There's not like I was successful because this is what I did. And now this crisis has brought us to, wow, what do we do to be successful? Because you really didn't have a plan.
Well, you use another favorite word of mine. They didn't have a plan, right?
Correct.
They didn't have a plan to fail, right?
That's right. Yes.
Must have
Correct.
a plan.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What about a high performance leader? You know, you wrote about that in your book too.
Yeah.
High performance leader.
Yeah.
And we want to be high performance leaders.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about this, high performance leaders.
Yeah. Now, when I talk about high performance leaders, I'm not talking about your academic accomplishments. Many people think when you talk about a high performance leader as a doctor, they have their masters. No, that's part of it, but it's not all of it. When I talk about a high performance leader, I talk about a leader who's able to influence others. Because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And that's something that John Maxwell always says. Because think about it. If you have a team and you cannot influence them, then you're not a leader. And then, go ahead, sorry. Yes.
Something, just triggered in my mind too, Aka, where someone in my team, right? I had asked him to do X.
Yeah.
And he didn't really want to do it. Said, Shivani, I am not doing this for the organization. I am doing this because you asked me to do that.
Wow.
And my heart felt so good.
Wow.
Because I said to myself, I'll probably reach one person working with me.
Absolutely. And Shivani,
I think that's influence, right?
That is influence. And what a compliment. Now, many organizations, and there was a poll that Gallup did last year, and 70% of the persons left because of their leader, not because of their organization. As a leader, it's important, just as Shivani said, what is the relationship you have with your team? Do they trust you? Are they loyal because of you? And that is so integral, especially in this crisis, because if your team believes in you and trusts you, they will stay with you in the storm because they trust you. Because you're honest.
Influence so much there, Aka.
Yeah.
In terms of Maxwell, also, you being a Maxwell coach.
Yeah.
And it's something that, again, I'm thinking about in terms of how do you lead from the middle? How do you lead from the middle? Right? So as in heads of departments, we may not be on the top, we are in the middle management. And how do you lead? We depend on top management and a senior C-suite, CEO to give directions. And
absolutely.
It's not like what it is.
Yes, and that takes a different level of competence and wisdom. If you lead up, what does that mean? For someone to listen to you, they have to trust you. You have to come with value. Many times, middle management, we say what the problem is, but we don't say what is the solution.
Yes.
If you want your top management to listen, then come with solutions. I tell my team all the time, if you come to me with an issue, come to me with a solution. And many times middle managers just say the what, but they never say the how. So you have to get to the place where you come with the what and the how and the why and the when and the who. Do your 5 W's and 1 H. Come with a value, add value. And it's also a conversation, and I know I have a couple of HR practitioners on the call. For us to kind of get that strategic table and be around that strategic table, we have to add value. When you add value, people notice you.
Yes, and you have to know what is the value you want to add.
Right.
What is the value that you want to add? How are you going to contribute?
Correct. Correct. Come with solutions. Think outside the box. In my book, I talked about you have to be so creative and innovative. You have to think outside the box. This pandemic has forced many organizations to put things in place that was on a shelf.
Yes.
I mean, looking at learning institutions, how many times students would say, can we have online classes?
Yes.
I can't come to class because I don't have a car or there's too much traffic. And many institutions said, no, we need that face-to-face interaction.
Yes. Yeah.
But you know, for 18 months to survive, it was online learning. And I tell leaders, nothing's wrong with failing, but just fail forward. So when you get up, you're steps ahead. Don't be afraid to fail. That's part of learning. But do not stifle your organization because you're risk adverse. And many organizations found themselves scrambling because they never took risks. It was status quo. This pandemic has forced people to fail forward, get up, fail forward, get up, because the environment was so fluid. You didn't have time to do a 6-month pilot to see if something worked. You had to make sure to survive that you had to pivot. You have to be agile. You have to be flexible. And that is something that is absolutely integral to be a leader. And so you asked me about a high performance leader. A high performance leader has to be creative. You have to think outside the box. You cannot be so stuck in your ways that you don't want to change, because change is the only way that you survive in this pandemic. Look at how much we've changed. Look at the
new
fact
habits. We created new habits.
Absolutely.
New habits are being created. New
Absolutely.
habits are being created.
Yes. How many employers said you cannot work from home because I can't manage you if you're at home? How many employers survived because of working from home? How many employers shied away from technology, but now only use technology?
I have a very, very good example. You spoke about technology, and I'm talking about new habits. In terms of in my team, they never wanted to use a lot. Some of them didn't really want to use the Zoom a lot because they said, okay, well, I need to have a laptop on my desk or something, because in terms of facilities management, we're all over the place. But you know what they had? People had no choice. They had to download the Zoom app on your phone now. So it forced new habits. It forced new habits. Things that you wanted to do, you know?
It's innovation. You must be innovative as a leader. You must be. That's what high performance leaders do. We pivot. We're agile. We're flexible. We're not afraid.
If you don't do that, we wouldn't be able to survive.
You become obsolete, and many organizations have become obsolete, unfortunately, over the last 18 months because they didn't pivot. I'll tell you something. Hyatt Regency Trinidad, I've been there for 10 years. And never once in our strategy meeting did we talk about curbside pickup. We're a hotel. What are you talking about curbside pickup? But you know what? We introduced it because we knew that restaurants were closed, but people still wanted our food. So, curbside pickup. We knew that people liked our sushi, so we asked groceries to carry our sushi. That wasn't part of strategy years ago, but we had to pivot. And I need leaders to ask yourself, are the strategies that you're using now the same strategies that you used in March of last year? Have you not changed anything? Then you have not changed. You have not pivoted. You have not evolved.
You hit the hammer on the nail with that one, Aka. You know, persons will still say they're going according to their strategic plan so many years ago, before 18 months ago. That can't work. How could that work now? And a lot of organization, you gotta You got to change, right? The whole digital
Absolutely.
transformation, also looking at new
Correct.
ways of doing something.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Something when we were talking about the high performance
Yes.
leader, and I like to look at it that we as leaders, what we need to do, and we spoke about it from a middle management level, and you have different levels of leadership, really is to remove the roadblocks. That is
That's
also our
right.
response. So your team got to come to you, and when they tell you X, Y, that is what we have to do. Remove the
Absolutely.
roadblocks. You know, project
Absolutely.
management professionals, and we have a lot of different PMs on the call also. And I know that is our responsibility.
Yes.
Remove roadblocks as leadership.
That's right. We should not ever be an obstacle. If our team sees us as an obstacle, we're not being effective. Leaders are creative. We create roadmaps. We create avenues. When we get a roadblock, we get a detour. That's what leaders do. We change. How many times we put on Waze and Waze says, you know what, change your route because there's traffic.
Yes.
That's what we do. We pivot. We pivot. And this pandemic has shown us that if you don't pivot, then you become obsolete. And your team feels vulnerable because they see that you're not willing to change. And you're failing, but you're too proud to say that you are because you want to stick to the strategy of March 2020.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us about emotion. We spoke a little bit about it. You introduced it. Emotional intelligence. And I'm looking for the page number in your book that you spoke about emotional intelligence, right? So
yes, that's in
tell us
chapter
about
1.
EI.
EI.
And the importance of it now.
If I were to prioritize the competencies that are critical right now as a leader, I think EI would either be 1 or 2. Emotional intelligence. I want you to think about this formula. This is a formula that our CEO, Mark Hoplamazium, uses. He says empathy plus action equals care. Empathy plus action equals care. As leaders, we cannot just say that we care. We have to show that we care. Emotional intelligence is saying you're a single mother with 3 children, 7, 9, and 12. They all have online learning. What does care look like to you? Care for a single mother with 3 children means flexible working hours. It means working from home. It's walking in that person's shoes and saying, if I were a single mother, what does care look like for me? And many times we misunderstand empathy and sympathy. I don't want you to feel bad for me or sorry for me. I want you to understand how I feel. And that's empathy. It's walking in the other person's shoes. And quite frankly, I tell my team all the time, I prefer to hire someone with a high EI than a high IQ. I mean, yes, you're bright, but how far does that brilliance take you in a team environment? I need someone with a high EI, especially if you are a leader, because that is what we do. Because you know what, when you show EI to a team, what do you think happens? There's loyalty, there's trust. You don't have a high turnover because people figure, you know what, I don't feel cared for, so I'm going to go somewhere that I feel cared for. So as a leader, you have high emotional intelligence. Your team will stay with you through this pandemic because they know that you genuinely care for them. And as I said before, care is a verb. It's a doing and a telling word. And that's what EI is. It's a doing and a telling word because you have to walk in the other person's shoes.
But Aka, you brought up a point there, right? Again, and just before we started this conversation, I came out of another one, and an individual during a class, and a person was saying in the class, and I'm hoping that I think there are also on the call some project managers, indicated that, persons may want to work. You give them, you as you said, you care and you give them the opportunity to work from home.
Yeah.
But then what about persons, you're giving them this to work from home now, and they cannot function, they're not accomplishing their deliverables. They're not accomplishing their deliverables. But I know what you're going to answer, how are you going to answer that? But I'll give you that question. I'll ask you that question. How it is then?
That's a leadership issue.
A leadership issue.
That's
exactly, it is a leadership issue.
If I say that you are going to be working from home, how am I measuring your productivity? Many employers measure productivity by the length of time you're on your laptop.
Yes.
That's not measuring productivity. That is measuring how long you're on the laptop. Productivity is quantitative, not qualitative. So if you're working from home, I must be able to tell you what you need to accomplish in an 8-hour day. Whether it is I did a motion study or I understand the length of time it takes for tasks. But you need to ensure that you measure productivity. Working from home does not mean that you only work 2 hours of an 8-hour day.
You set your limits, you set.
That's right. And you set tasks that need to be completed, input, output. So at the end of the 8-hour day, you need to send me outputs.
All right. So you use another favorite word of mine. Everybody will know. I look at the outcomes, the outputs-based approach.
That's productivity. Productivity is input and output. Output is your productivity. That's how you measure productivity, by the output of performance. But many employers, unfortunately, if you don't have structure, process, procedure, how do you measure productivity? Do you even measure it now? Do you have a dashboard? How do you know what your targets are? And these are a lot of quantifiable indicators, key performance indicators that many organizations do not have in place.
Yes.
And so in a crisis, then you are absolutely chaotic because you don't know what you were doing before. So in a crisis, how do you establish what needs to be done? You have no yardstick.
You have no procedures.
Yeah. So it's absolutely critical that there's structure and outputs, performance managing. So we can do it. Many of our staff right now do a hybrid approach because they're productive. And it's all about productivity. It's all about seeing you, because we have many organizations, I wouldn't name any, they come to work every day and they're not productive. Productivity is not a visual see in your face. Productivity is output.
You see what you do, again, I'm pausing because it comes back to the same start of the conversation, that this crisis, you're seeing that persons didn't have the structures, didn't have the processes in place, and they were just going along with the flow. Correct. And yes, you're making revenue, but now you're really seeing but things change.
Yes.
And therefore, what do you have the processes that you could now give to your team and say, hey, you all got to do this, could we change this? And you don't have it. They're back to the drawing board.
Absolutely. And that is so critical, because I remember a particular manager called me and they said, Aka, we have a problem. We cannot open our store. What could we do? I said, first thing you need to do is do an inventory. This was retail. Do an inventory of all the items that you have. Do some analysis of the items that has the highest turnover.
They didn't know.
No. I said, so which items has your highest turnover? They said, we never thought about that. I said, tell me your cost and your sale price and what's your break even. These are things that you have to think about, but you should have this information at your fingertips. When you are asking me this,
data management.
It's facts and data. You must be able to say in a pandemic, okay, we are going to have to do some inventory management. What are our top 5 selling items? What could we reduce? What is our break-even point? How do we get this churn from the shelf? But many employers, and it's here.
Yeah, no, it's so you're speaking to me, and I've seen it. I'm in it. I know.
You have to measure it.
You don't. The person's gonna tell you. Yeah.
No, it's too ad hoc. We have to come to a place where, as leaders, we must use facts and data to make informed decisions and not emotions. And if you want to be a leader that gets that respect, you must be able to understand the business and make informed decisions based on facts and data, not because of how you feel on a particular day, but because there's structure, there's process, there's procedure, there's measurement, there is follow-up, there's follow-through, there's feedback, there is risk. Those types of things afford you the opportunity to become a high-performance leader.
Yes.
Absolutely critical.
Thus far in our conversation so far, the key takeaways up to this point for me would really be, one, what do you understand your organization before the pandemic, right? Did you have this data? How do you measure? Do you know how you're making money? How much money do you need to survive? Do you have that data?
Yes.
And now, in the pandemic and going to beyond, leaders need to firstly have that data. And if you didn't have that data, how do you pivot? How do you become more agile? You know, another favorite word of mine, I have a lot of favorite words like you, Aka, right? Is organized chaos. But I shouldn't talk that too much here, but organized chaos, right?
Yeah.
And in leadership right now, you may have chaos, but we could work the chaos.
Absolutely.
You could work the chaos.
Because it's not absolute chaos.
Yeah.
It's chaos in the moment.
Chaos in the moment.
In the moment.
In the moment.
But there is some sort of guiding principle that anchors your chaos. But if you don't have a guiding principle, which again is your foundation, think about your organization like a foundation, like a house. Your policies, your procedures is your foundation. In an earthquake, if your foundation is good, your house shakes, but it's okay. If your foundation is not stable in an earthquake, it falls away. And because a lot of organizations did not have policy and procedure, their foundation, this pandemic rocked their world. Organizations that was able to navigate through this crisis had a foundation. And unfortunately, it took the crisis for many organizations and leaders to realize, I don't have any policies. I have no guiding principles. I have no procedures. I have no job descriptions. I have no SOPs. I don't have a performance management system. And that rocked their worlds. We need to have a solid foundation as leaders. You must create it. It's up to us. Even if you go into an organization and it doesn't have, then you put it in place. Yeah, you cannot say, well, it didn't exist.
Put it in place.
Put it in place. That's what leaders do. We lead. We lead. And the root word of leadership is lead.
Here. It's the lead. Not a question, a point actually from Cindy. Plan work outputs with the employee. Plan the work outputs with the employee.
Yeah, and Cindy, that's a great comment. You know, many leaders, we give our teams goals and they're not part of the process. They're not part of the conversation. So it's almost like it's a commandment and we hand it down. What is that? When there's ownership and conversation, then there's buy-in.
So true.
As leaders, if you're going to set goals for your team, have a conversation. Let them own it. Let them be part of the process. Because then they know what is expected because they were part of the expectation.
I think someone else is commenting and said, probably it's train, I feel. Train your employees. I'm hoping that's what you mean. Yeah, and you have to train. Yes, teamwork makes the dream team. Teamwork makes the dream work.
And that comment about training, again, why I'm not sure why people view training as an event.
Continuous. It's not a destination.
No.
It's not a destination. Yes, is what you will say.
It is not a destination. It's a journey. Every day is an opportunity to train. There's on-the-spot training. You know, there's taking, as a leader, how do you add value? By sharing your knowledge, by training others. Training is not put it on the calendar, you tick it off as a box. The return on training investment is only seen after the training, but it has to be measured. Many people go on training and then they come back to work and there's no report, there's no, what are you going to do? So then that training was time away from work. That's not what training is. Training is taking the knowledge, putting up an action plan, implementing the action plan, seeing if it works, tweak it based on your environment, and it's continuous. That's what training is. Return on training investment.
Yes.
You must have a return
so we have
on
another
your
comment.
investment. Sure.
Rennie, I agree with the actual involvement of the staff to encourage buy-in, like what you were saying, Aka.
Absolutely.
And it's important to the future growth of the company. Yes, and more than now ever, you know, during this crisis, you have to sit with your employees, as you will see. How do we get out? What do we need to do? Tell us, bring ideas.
That's
Don't only say
creativity.
it's a problem.
Yes. And
that is creativity.
And you know what, leaders? I always tell my team, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I need to change my room. I do not want to be the smartest person in my team. I want to be able to learn and grow from my team. I want you to say, Aka, you know what, let's try this. But a lot of leaders are intimidated when others give better examples than them. That's okay. That's okay. I love when a team member tells me something. I'm like, wow, you know, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, great. You give me the idea. Great.
We have to get past
I'm going to read something you said.
Yes. Go ahead.
What you said, we must think outside of the box or kick down the box in extreme circumstances during a crisis.
That's right.
Kick down the box.
Right. Kick it down. That's okay. Kick down the box. Because if that's what is required, then kick it down. The only thing that will get better is your process, your procedure, your innovation, your creativity. But don't be so into one box and you stifle your team. Because this pandemic especially, you need to be innovative. So kick it down. How many people discovered things because they tried and they thought outside the box? You know, think about it. I mean, I always am amazed at Amazon. And when you study the evolution of Amazon and where this man started in his garage, and now he is one of the richest men in the world. And one of the few companies in this pandemic that recorded a profit of 30% over forecast for the last 9 months. And that's because he was innovative. He said, okay, you cannot go out everything possible you'll get on Amazon. You want food on Amazon, you want a carpet on Amazon, you want this. That's what he did. Super creative. And that's what we have to do. We have to use the energy of a crisis and create an opportunity.
I like when you say in actual, what somebody said at the same point. I agree with actual involvement of the staff, right, Rennie? And we were talking about that. It just also triggered in my mind is a lot of ideation, creativity, innovation. You want your team to ideate. Now, that is what you want during this crisis. But how would we get our team to ideate? Is what you were saying to Aka. You need your team to trust you. They needed to trust you. Otherwise, nobody's going to come up with any ideas because they don't trust you.
Absolutely.
Trust you.
And then if you don't have a trusting environment, I will be uncomfortable speaking up. Because I will be afraid of the repercussions of speaking up. Because you did not create an environment that augurs well for thinking outside the box. You never created an environment that encourages feedback. Yes. You had a meeting, all your meetings, you are the only voice in the meeting.
Yeah.
What?
And a lot of leaders like to do that. They just want to talk alone. That's not leaders.
That's not a meeting. Again, if people think about the root words of what we use, meeting is to meet. It's coming together. So if you are the only voice in a meeting, you're not meeting, you're talking. Who have you met? Yes. Who you have not connected. So we need to understand the words that we use and the root of it. A meeting is just that, coming together of minds, ideas, which is rooted, and it's something that I use a lot in my team, design thinking.
Oh, yes, design thinking, yes. Great leadership.
Absolutely, because it gets to creativity. You go into asking questions, you go into prototyping, you go into ideate, and it's a constant process. And that's where we have to get to the place of design thinking, asking why, going deep, getting to the root of the issue so that you have an impact long term and not short term, because you're not just outing fires. You've thought it through, it makes sense, it's applicable, and it's gone through the test of time. And many leaders don't do that. They're just constantly outing fires because there's no strategy, there's no process. So something happens, let's do this. Something happens, let's do this. You don't get consistency in the organization. Because structure, consistency with accountability.
Someone also mentioned in assigning tasks, there must be clear articulation of the expectation, deliverables, timeframes, resources. Of course, you would. What do you think about that?
That's consistency.
Yeah. Because persons would know what they have to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have heard of employers that they hire somebody and tomorrow the person starts. And I said, okay, so did you give the person a job description? No. Do they have standard operating procedures? Did you give them objectives? They have goals? Are they smart? And they look at me like, no. So then, how do you maintain a consistent culture, work environment, high performance environment without these foundational key aspects, which is what we just spoke about? That means your foundation is not solid. Absolutely critical.
It's coming back to that over and over, not having a strong foundation.
Yes.
Having a strong foundation. You don't have the structure.
Correct.
So, Aka, tell us, in this new normal, how could we pivot? What can leaders do more now? But you see future-driven leaders then, future-driven leaders, how could we drive productivity? A lot of in our organization, a lot of people, they are demotivated. They, they don't know where they're going. A lot of organizations may, you can't make the salaries. What do people do?
Yes, yes. It really is it's a really, really tough period. And I think there's some key things that I would recommend that persons do. If you don't have structure, put structure in place. In order for us to get to the other side of this pandemic, we need to be leaders that we would like to follow. We need to develop an engaged workforce. How do you get an engaged workforce? Have you done an employee survey recently? Have you asked your staff for their opinion? Does their opinion count? We are going through this crisis and you're trying to out fires. Did you ask the staff that actually do the job? What do they think?
Sometimes it's true. Very true.
Sometimes we talk about team. But do you ever ask feedback from your team? Or do you just do everything on your own and you just want everyone to follow because of your title? We have to get to the place where we build a trusting environment.
Performance management and building trust.
That's right. It's performance management, building trust. How many times have we gone to establishments in Trinidad? I know we have some persons who are outside of Trinidad, and the door opens late because it's Trini time. What is that? What is that? It starts with those little things, Do you have a punctuality and attendance policy? Do you hold persons accountable for not coming to work on time? Are you the leader that comes to work late? Do you do an honest exchange work for pay? Because I always tell people wages and exchange. We have to get to that state, that autocratic style of leadership that says, do as I do.
Yes.
Do as I say and not as I do. Especially if you're leading millennials. You cannot tell a millennial to respect me. It has to be gained. Respect is not demanded, it's gained. Those are the things that we have to go back to. Why did you get into leadership in the first place? Was it to add value to others? Was that your impetus of being a leader, to add value? If it was not, then you shouldn't lead.
They don't understand leadership.
No, because to lead people, you have to love people.
And that is why, Aka, you will definitely say that there's a difference with management and leaders. There's a difference.
You manage resources, you lead people. You manage resources and you lead people.
Yeah. So it comes back to your term, empathy, love, care.
It's care.
That is what will get us out of it.
It's caring for people, that you could tap into their potential and they feel respected and valued. And that's what we need to get to that place. It's not about being autocratic. It's not about speaking down. It's not about being demeaning or condescending. It's about treating people how you would like to be treated. It's remembering that you weren't born into leadership. You worked yourself into leadership. And your title is not a representation of the respect you get. The respect that you get is an indication of who you are. I always tell leaders as we wrap up, I know it's getting late.
No, I don't even know the time. We're having such a great time.
Yes. a lot of persons, I say the reputation of a leader is best found when the leader is not in the room. What does your team say about you when you're not there? How do they work when you're not there? How do they perform when you're not there? Your team should be better because you've added value to them when you're not there. That's how you measure your leadership. How good is your team in your absence? Not in your presence, in your absence. Because you've
Well
added
said,
value.
Aka.
Yeah.
Value.
Yeah.
So once you add value to your team,
Yeah,
you know
they're gonna
persons
shine.
will work.
They're going to shine.
Yeah.
They are going to shine. Yeah.
So key takeaways up to this
Yeah.
point again for me in our
Yeah.
wonderful conversations. Besides, one of the key takeaways is that ensuring everybody, get a copy of your book, right? The Master Guide to Leadership Through Lens of Care.
Yeah.
Key takeaways for me for this conversation: leaders, it's a very, very important rule. Yes, I have so many takeaways. There's a difference with management and leaders, as we all know.
Absolutely.
And now, as in this job, during this crisis, once you're in an organization, this is the only way that we will survive. If you can't manage, you've got to lead. And lead is emotional intelligence, empathy.
Yeah.
It has a lot to do with trust, as you said.
Yeah.
It got a lot to do with ideation. Would people bring new ideas to me? Because that's what we want. We want persons to bring new ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think everything so far was a favorite of mine, but what is really, really, really a favorite? A lot of organizations, they were doing so well, but now they just crashed. And the reason, one of the main reasons, is that they could not, they couldn't pivot into the new direction because they had no structure, they had no policy. Correct. So you have no data. You have no data. Correct. I'm saying that over and over because I've seen a few organizations right now, and that's what they're about. They do not know what they need to sell in order to survive, as you said. They don't know because they just don't have that data.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Correct. And then you could focus. So if you knew this is what is going to make my money right now, then I'll put all my energies in that. That's correct. Put all my energies in that.
Correct. You know what products or services.
Products-based thinking. Absolutely. Product-based thinking. And you said my favorite word too, which is design thinking.
Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. So we get it, a lot of persons saying, well articulated, Aka, you acknowledge your experience, on full display. I see your passion. Thanks for taking the time to share your wisdom. Yes, I totally agree, of course. So Aka, tell us some closing words, right?
Sure.
Tell us some, and before you tell us the closing words, if anybody would like to write anything in the chat, I've seen persons were writing. I saw Rennie again. Some companies don't even know what their brand is. That is so true.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And how do you survive in a crisis when you don't know what's your brand? How do you differentiate? It's integral. And that's because many organizations, and by extensions leaders, they didn't even know why they were successful.
Yeah, it's coming back to that. It's coming back to that.
Yeah, you must have a strategy. So, in closing, I would like to share with you that we can add value. Leadership is such a privilege. It's such an honor. And if you are the leader that you would like to follow, then ask why. Do you really care for people? Do you really care for people? Because care is a verb. And what a privilege and honor it is to lead others. And when we see leadership as a privilege and an honor, then the way that you treat your team will be in alignment with that privilege. We
Well
must
said.
be consistent. We cannot have one policy for one set of people and one for another. Leadership is consistency.
Mhm.
Leadership is accountability. We cannot hold others accountable if we do not hold ourselves accountable. When you speak about leadership, it's not about your academic accomplishments. It's about your behavioral traits. That's what leadership
Yes.
is.
Mhm.
That's what leadership is. It's how you treat persons. It's how you are able to get people to work in spite of how they may feel.
Mhm. Understanding behaviors.
Absolutely. And your attitude as a leader determines the altitude of your team. Your attitude as a leader determines how high or how low your team goes. And that is the importance that you play as a leader. You are the catalyst. Think about yourself as a pebble. If you drop a pebble in the ocean, the ripple effect is how you are effective as a leader. If the ripple effect is very small, that means you only impact your direct team. If you are able to impact the entire organization, then your leadership has become so pervasive that you are able to impact the lives of others. And that's what leadership is. And we have to understand that as leaders. And this is not only in organizations, it's in governments, it's in schools, because leadership is influence. If you're a teacher, you're a leader.
You lead
Because
the classroom of
you influence others.
Yes.
If you're a parent, you're a leader.
So once you're in an influential role.
That's what leadership is.
Yes.
Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less.
Well said again.
So when we understand that leadership is your ability to influence others, we understand that there's so many roles that we play in our lives and we lead because we think leadership is a title. Leadership is
a privilege.
That's right. It's an honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's a privilege.
Aka, thank you so much for participating in this wonderful conversation on leadership. I mean, we discussed a lot about leadership, the role of a leader really, and what are some of the traits that we need to have to really survive in this pandemic and beyond. So Aka, I know we're going to be, you and I are going to have more conversations, definitely upcoming in the new year on coaching, mentoring, training, and we have a number of workshops that we will be doing on leadership in the new pandemic, in the new era.
I look forward to that. And if you would like to get a copy of my book, it's on Amazon, so you could get it on Amazon, either the paperback or the Kindle version. You could call 490-2273 and we could have the book delivered, or the book is available in Sharon's bookstore in Trinity Mall, the Old Bookstore in St. Augustine, and Books and Office Supplies in Tobago. But I know I have a few foreign persons, so you can definitely go on Amazon and type in the title of the book, The Master Guide to Leadership Through the Lens of Care, and you can get a copy. I have downloaded my 20 years of experience in this book because I really want to help others. This is my opportunity to give back. It's not filled with jargon, it's very practical, because I want you to use this book and make your team and make you the leader that you would like to follow.
Well said,
the best version of yourself.
Best version of yourself. And we saw Sydney said she's looking forward to the workshop. So definitely we also look forward to the workshops in the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Aka.
luck.
And on
Yes.
behalf of the Caribbean Connect family, we wish to say thanks to you, thanks to the audience for being here. We look forward again to seeing you back here shortly. All the best,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take
Stay
care.
blessed.
Be
Stay
safe.
safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.